play. Unger will play Basic Plains, Legion's Landing. Isolated Chapel, turn 2 for Edgar. Attack for 1 for Unger, 19 to 21 in his favor. Law Rune Enforcer, second Plains. No second or third 1-drop, rather, so won't be able to transform the landing right away.
Yeah, it's interesting. Edgar's actually playing Esper Control this weekend. Most people that I've talked to have actually shifted away from Esper Control in favor of the more mid-range strategy featuring Hero Precinct 1 and main deck Thief of Sanity. But there's definitely something to be said about the number of total absorbs that are seeing play right now in these control decks. Some people have gone down to 0. I know Brian Gottlieb advocated for a control version that played a lot more Planeswalkers and 0 copies of Absorb. I'm curious how many Edgar is playing, but if you're curious, you can also check it out on the Cardboard Live extension.
So there's some huge swings in Edgar's favor. He's been able to keep this game under control. Moment of Craving on the first creature. Teferi to bounce a token. You saw Cry of the Carnarium just cleaning up the first History of Benalia as a second one shows up for Unger.
Yeah, this is looking really good for Edgar here. The plus on the Teferi allowed him to cast Cry of the Carnarium at instant speed. Chris actually stacked it in such a way where he didn't lose everything, and then the Teferi Time Reveler had to come down and knock off the last token, if you will.
Yeah, so Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, joined the party. Conclave Tribunal took care of little Teferi, but big Teferi is hanging around as Edgar's going to go to work drawing some cards.
And honestly, that one's usually the most dangerous to be left around, but that Time Raveler was threatening to minus and bounce the last creature that Unger had access to potentially threaten the Planeswalker, so chose to go for the Time Raveler instead.
Vraska's Contempt ended up saving this Teferi from that Knight token, but Unger has a third History of Benalia. He's going to try to make some inroads on the battlefield. See Edgar using a Chemister's Insight on his main phase, plussing on the Teferi. And Thought Erasure going to be cast. Take a look at the hand. It looks like Benalish Marshal, Venerated Loxodon, and a Teferi Time Raveler of Unger's own. And the Marshal will hit the bin.
I'm curious if Edgar actually has an answer for this token here. I don't think so, but that Teferi is at 3, so it is going to survive this attack. I know he has a negate in hand, I think. Or was it a negate? I saw a blue card. I thought it was a counterspell.
I didn't see it myself, but Unger is going to apply a lot more pressure. You see that second Knight token shows up. Venerated Loxodon is going to bump those up to 3 after knocking the Teferi down to 1. See what Edgar can do about it. He'll draw for turn, draw off of his Teferi. Akaya's Wrath would be welcome.
Absolutely, but they have trimmed quite a bit, Esper Control has on Kai's Wrath, sometimes down to even 2 copies in favor of those main deck Cry of the Carnarium.
Looks like Jumpstart Chemister's Insight once again on the main phase. Read is certainly that the hand needs some help.
Yeah, this is not a super good spot for Edgar, but he has a lot of life to work with. He has a Mortify for the Tribunal, which gives him an extra card off the Time Raveler bounce. So this is... he's catching up against these swarms of creatures. He's fought through 3 copies of History of Benalia.
Yeah, so that took care of 1 Knight token. Now Chapter 3 will pump the other. So he got a little stat boost, but he just used them to attack down low loyalty Planeswalkers. But Edgar now just with a bunch of lands on the battlefield.
Yeah, but he also has a grip full of cards and 23 life to work with. So even if, even though Chris was able to get the Planeswalkers off the battlefield, still has a lot of work to do, and Edgar going to get to untap with a Search for Azcanta, transform it immediately, and this game's all but over already.
He had the Kai's Wrath, that cleaned it up really nicely. Yep. Search for Azcanta, Teferi, Dovin's Veto on your Teferi. Edgar Magalhaes takes down game number 1.
Yeah, really impressive stuff from Edgar. Very clean, uses Planeswalkers to great effect, knew exactly when to let them go. Gained a bunch of card advantage along the way and very easily beat 3 copies of History of Benalia.
So players are going to be grabbing their sideboards here. You can check these out using the Cardboard Live extension here. Chris Unger on Azorius Aggro. Let's read off the sideboard for him. He has 2 Deputy of Detention. How do you like that one?
Not a huge fan. You want that more for decks that don't have a lot of spot removal. It's really good in the mirrors of these Azorius Aggro decks.
4 Baffling Ends.
Again, more for creature-based matchups. I don't love it. Even though there's a chance Edgar pivots towards a Thief of Sanity sideboard plan, I don't think that you want Baffling in.
Demystify.
That card, it does kill Search for Azcanta, but that's more for the Wilderness Reclamation decks or maybe even the Mirror.
Disdainful Stroke.
That card is quite good here. It stops Kai's Wrath, stops the 5 and 6 mana Planeswalkers. It's a little bit worse than something like Dovin's Veto or Negate, but it's still serviceable.
Well, he has 2 Dovin's Veto, so you're liking that one.
Yeah.
2 Spell Pierce.
Yeah, all the counter spells I think come in. They just have a lot of value against the more expensive spells from the Esper control deck. This and Wilderness Reclamation decks are the reason why the counter spells are in the sideboard.
Gideon Blackblade.
I like it. It gets around sweepers itself by just being a planeswalker that kind of turns off on your opponent's turn. It's also indestructible, which is nice, even if Edgar has the Time Raveler +1. Plus the Kaya's Wrath, but you know, it's good. It's Planeswalker.
Right. How do you feel about third Teferi Time Raveler and a basic island?
I like both. You need the extra blue source when you're boarding in all those blue spells.
All right. And looks like players are keeping their 7s here. Unger is going to be on the play. Basic Plains Skymarcher Aspirant follows up with the Danto Vanguard. That's definitely a big win in this kind of matchup as he knocks Edgar down to 18.
Yeah, this start here from Unger is quite good. Now it's going to need something like a Cry of the Carnarium on turn 3 from Edgar to clear off this Adanta Vanguard, or potentially something like Moment of Craving off the top. Traditional removal doesn't kill Danto.
Pretty significant for duress for Edgar. He took care of a History of Benalia before we see Unger follow up with an attack for 5, Edgar to 13, and 2 more 1-drops, a Snubhorde Sentry and another Skymarcher Aspirant. Just Moment of Craving for the Danto Vanguard. That's actually pretty good. Edgar up to 15.
Yeah, it's a great answer here, but he's still under a lot of pressure from these other creatures. He needs a Kaya's Wrath or a Cry of the Carnarium right here, or this might be over.
Yeah, Aspirants knocked him down to 11, and Dauntless Bodyguard joins the party. It looks like 9 total permanents. Nothing could get the City's Blessing, so the Sentry hangs back as an attack for 6 happens. Moment of Craving, once again, will target something.
Yeah, really needed to draw Legion's Landing or History of Benalia to generate 2 permanents off of 1 card there. Fortunately for Chris, now he's just going to be a little bit short of turning on the Snubhorde Sentry. That's one of the reasons why I'm not a huge fan of Snubhorde in this matchup. Even though it survives Cry of the Carnarium, you need to hit 10 permanents for it to basically do anything. And it's hard to ask against a deck with a bunch of sweepers.
From 7, Edgar will cast Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, tick that up, draw a card on tap 2 lands. Unger only has 4 power as it stands, 3 permanents off of the City's Blessing. I'd be surprised to see the Sentry connect this turn.
Yeah, if he didn't play anything last turn, I can't imagine that he's going to hit the City's Blessing this turn.
So he'll cast Teferi Time Raveler after playing a land, so a potential Spell Pierce wouldn't play here.
Yeah, this is important because now it gives him perfect information since Edgar is no longer allowed to cast spells on his turn. So he decides to attack the Teferi for 4. Instead of Edgar's life total.
And he minus 3 Teferi. He bounced his own Snubhorde Sentry. You can actually choose to bounce nothing. Didn't matter. Ends up casting the spell he drew and the Sentry again. Dauntless Bodyguard showing up. And now he has the City's Blessing.
Yeah, I think that was more of a cognizant choice to maybe you don't want the Snubhorde Sentry to get caught in a Kaya's Wrath.
Sure. At this point, it's not clear that you're beating a Kaya's Wrath.
I mean, that's fair. Now, the Dauntless Bodyguard helps out a bit, and he does have the City's Blessing, which is nice, so he can save a 3-power creature.
Edgar uses a Thought Erasure just to surveil, and then fires off a Moment of Craving on one of the Aspirants, so go to 9.
It's insane to me how often that happens, just the surveil off of Thought Erasure and not the discard.
You're happy that you have it, but it's not ideal. And now Teferi is going down to the Aspirant, 5 points coming across, Edgar down to 4.
Yeah, he needs a sweeper. This is looking pretty bad for him. Another Teferi, and I think he actually has the minus on... no, if he minuses, he's dead.
Yeah, you would need to have minus plus something, right? So he just ticks up and concedes.
And he can't utilize that extra 2 mana during the instep because of the Teferi Time Raveler. So really strong showing from Chris Unger. Came out the gate swinging. Edgar, though, the story of that game, never drew a Cry of the Carnarium, never drew a Kaya's Wrath. Ultimately just got chipped to death by a bunch of 1-mana, 2-power creatures.
So let's talk about Edgar's sideboard now. He has 4 Thief of Sanities.
Yeah, not a huge fan of that. That's more for the control matchups. But, I mean, I don't know. I've seen people do weirder things.
It can block, I guess.
Yeah, it can block, and every time it connects, you are gaining basically a 1-mana creature that trades for a 1-mana creature. So it is by no means a poor card in the matchup. And I personally have brought it in before, and I have seen other people bring it in before too.
1 Dovin's Veto.
I think you want to cut most of the counter spells in this matchup. There's not a whole lot of hits for them, and also they're just not that good.
Moment of Craving, we saw plenty of those. That's a slam dunk. He has a copy of Negate.
Nah.
Lyra Dawnbringer.
Lyra's pretty good. I think Lyra is one of those creatures that can stall long enough for your other cards to work, and there's not a whole lot of removal from the other side.
Vona, Butcher of Magan.
Very similar to another Lyra Dawnbringer, but it's just not legendary, so I would definitely bring in both those big life-linking creatures, I think.
Kaya Orzhov Usurper.
a lot of one-mana creatures from the opponent's side, and it can gain life. So I do like Kaya quite a bit.
Cry the Carnarium, obviously, that one's going to be good. The Elder Spell's not for this matchup. And we did see him cast one of his 2 Duresses at least.
Yeah, I mean, he needs a couple ways after sideboard to potentially strip Chris of counter spells, or maybe one of those Planeswalkers or History of Benalia. We saw him snag History in game 2. Well, this is a weird start.
This turn one's really interesting, actually. Edgar played Tap Godless Shrine. Unger led on Island. That's his sideboard island. He's clutching a Spell Pierce. His turn 2 is just 1/1 drop, which is how you have to navigate when you have an island in this deck. It's just Sky Marcher Aspirant.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty wild. I think Unger was just really afraid of either a Thought Erasure or a Search for Escanta on turn 2. Decided to hold up Spell Pierce on the draw instead of playing a creature. To me, that's crazy. But it looks like it's working out for him quite well, because Edgar didn't play anything on turns 1, 2, or 3.
And he's curved into a Dono Vanguard, History of Benalia, leaving up Spell Pierce the whole time. Now we see Cry the Carnarium. Edgar has sniffed that out.
Woof.
I mean, it's obvious the Spell Pierce was there, and now that Cry the Carnarium, that's just going to clean up.
Yeah, that Cry the Carnarium, snagging 3 creatures. History of Benalia, though, does give Chris a sliver of hope at the very least.
And here's Moment of Craving on that other Knight token, and Unger now just with nothing. He's got a Spell Pierce in hand that Edgar is certainly respecting and really just has enough mana to do whatever. Here's Gideon Blackblade for Unger. That's some kind of threat, but Edgar is at 15 still.
Here's the thing. Not playing a creature on turn 1 and holding up Spell Pierce ultimately slows the game down. At some point, Edgar realized there was a Spell Pierce on the other side, decided that, okay, for the rest of the game, I'm basically just going to play around Spell Pierce. And because Chris Unger didn't put pressure on him early on, he was basically able to wait until 2 turns after the fact each time to play around that Spell Pierce, and now the Spell Pierce is effectively a dead card in Unger's hand.
Gideon knocks Edgar to 11. Teferi Time Raveler shows up. That'll bounce the Search for Escanta. He'll draw a card. Legion's Landing makes a token. Go back Edgar's way. Here's that Search for Escanta again, and an Oath of Kaya.
Yeah, Oath of Kaya can check the creature, but I think, knocking off the Time Raveler so that Edgar can actually play things at instant speed lets his deck kind of unlock.
And he goes up to 14 off of that. Once again, Gideon will attack. Knock him down to 9.
There's a really good argument next turn for Chris to actually minus the Gideon Blackblade on the Search for Escanta, because he doesn't want it to transform. That's really where the true strength of Edgar's deck lies, is cards like Teferi and Search for Escanta. But you don't want to trade the entire Gideon for it. You just want to trade 6 loyalty.
Well, there was a good counterspell for Unger. Disdainful Stroke did eat a Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. But as you mentioned, that Gideon is up to 7 loyalty. He can just use that to go ahead and eat the Search for Escanta.
Yeah, I would 100% do that here. Card is potentially the only thing that's going to get Edgar out of this. I'm pretty sure it's able to transform next turn. And it leaves him with the Planeswalker still, because it's only a -6, not a -7.
And he goes for the Oath of Kaya. And he'll attack with 3 creatures, transform Legion's Landing. Connects for 6 points there. Sky Marcher Aspirant as a follow-up. And he has the City's Blessing. Edgar's life total has disappeared. And here's a Cry of the Carnarium. That'll clean up everything but the Gideon. And Thief of Sanity shows up. That's Chump Blocker at this point. Adanto, the first port, will make a token. Here's an attack. Gideon gets Chump Block with Thief of Sanity. 1 point comes across. Edgar, I believe, is at 2.
Yeah, this is kind of why I wasn't a huge fan of siding on Thief of Sanity. You get in a spot where you no longer have the capability to attack. Your deck is all about casting stuff like Cry of the Carnarium, but this game is all but over. Edgar has very few ways to deal with what's on the battlefield, let alone beating a resolved Transformed Legion's Landing. And unless he has a sweeper here, plus a good follow-up, this game is basically over.
Venerator locks it on, showed up. We saw Edgar pick up a Moment of Craving off of his Sunken Ruin, but main phase, he just has to activate that again, and he will pick him up. Chris Unger, 2-1 winner over Edgar Magalhaes, and